Welcome, Gunrunner.
Hello everybody, Retrolad here, back with another video for you all. Now, a few weeks back, maybe a little bit more, doesn't seem like that long ago, I did a video review of the documentary World 1-1, which was uh, near enough about 2 hour long documentary film about the early days of video gaming from an American perspective, mainly covering Atari. There was some stuff about Ralph Baer and the Odyssey in there, but those early years of when the sort of industry sprung up, and it was an excellent film. It featured many luminaries from the video game world, people like Nolan Bushnell were in it, David Crane, and I thoroughly loved it from start to finish. So really, after watching that, it sent me on a kind of trip to watch lots of other great video game movies, because there's been absolutely loads coming out recently for some reason. I don't know why there's been so many, but there has. So this one is probably one of the more well-known ones that's been out recently, which is From Bedrooms to Billions. I've chosen to review this next. It's being talked about still a lot. It's been very popular, and as soon as my World 1-1 video review went down so well, I thought, why not, let's do another, and this seemed like the best candidate. So I only watched this fairly recently. I was a bit late to go and grab it, mainly because I had a few reservations about it, which I'll go into. So that's pretty much what put me off buying it, and I'll go into those in a little while. But I decided to, after enjoying World War One, and I read a few more reviews of Bedrooms to Billions from people I know, I decided to bite the bullet and grab it. And I have to say, actually, another reason why I took quite a while to actually, to go and grab it, was because it's extortionately expensive. I don't know why it costs so much. I can't remember offhand how much it is now, but I think someone was quoting that if you bought the actual complete Blu-ray set, so and I myself am more of a fan of having physical media, it was £50, and I just can't justify spending £50 on a documentary film. I mean, I just find that absolutely criminal that they can charge that much. I mean, it actually just makes me quite angry, especially seeing as From Bedrooms to Billions, like World 1-1. Excuse my dogs barking; they're going on one. It's all about, was done originally as a Kickstarter. So you do wonder sort of why they're being so greedy when they raise the money from the community in the first place to be able to make it. I just find it astounding that they can charge that much. And also, there has been lots of delays on getting this film out. There's been delays on getting the soundtrack out, it's been delayed from start to finish, and a lot of people did get very, very angry waiting for it. And I have to say, after having seen the movie, I can understand why people are getting so angry, because I can't see anything special about the movie that would have held up getting it out there, or getting any of the individual parts out there. This may sound like I'm starting off very negative. I think it's just the flow of where I'm going, but the movie is very good, which I'll start talking about that now, I suppose, to take away from the negative of the moment. I mean, it's nice and long. Since you remember, over 2 hours, especially with the extras. There's some extra bits as well. I chose to get the extras as well. The extras include an interview with David Braben behind Elite, and making of Jet Set Radio Manic Miner with Matthew Smith, which are pretty good. But the main documentary itself is very, unlike World War One, is very, very UK focused. So we have interviews with people from Ocean Software, Imagine, all of those early sort of pioneers of the UK games industry. There's interviews with the people behind magazines like Crash and Zap 64, which played a big part in that, and CMVG and magazines like those. So they're involved in the film. There's a few people who are friends of mine involved in the film as well, who I know quite well. So, for example, Jim Bagley, and he's in there. So, big shout out to Jim. A few other people I've met in person as well in there, especially a lot of the Ocean Software guys who I was lucky enough to meet at the Revival shows. Went on, and a lot of the Crash guys as well I've met at the Revival shows as well. So great to see all of them involved in the film. But what it kind of does is it looks at where the industry went from basically being nothing to starting off with like the mail order side, and type-in listings being sort of the first games that are available, and then it becoming a commercial industry, which a lot of that is still credited to Imagine, and it very much is in this film. They kind of credit Imagine as being the first sort of proper big software house in the UK that really started that proper distribution network, and the professional look of the games with the colour inlays and everything like that. And there's a lot about that in the film, and then it moves into how that industry grew. There's some focus on a few of the machines, which are the Spectrum, a lot of focus on the Spectrum, as you can probably imagine. There's a lot of focus on the Commodore 64, which was obviously quite successful as well. And then there's, strangely, a big focus on the BBC, which kind of is a bit strange, but not in a way. I suppose you can see why it's there, because it was the educational computer. It was on TV because of the BBC. A lot of people use them at schools, but it was never a big gaming machine, so that's why I thought it was maybe a strange choice to include. I mean, I've got a lot of fondness for the BBC, because if I hadn't been for the BBC, I would have got an A in computer studies at school. I wrote my very first basic programs on a BBC Micro, so I've got a lot of fondness for it. But I did think it was a strange choice to include that maybe over others. I mean, there's not really much about the Amstrad in there, for example. That was quite a big part, especially with the UK industry, not worldwide, but it was very much so here. There's no mention of the Atari 8-bit computers, which sold a lot more than the BBC did. So there's other formats that maybe they could have sort of given a little bit of a shout out in there as well if they were just going to do the BBC. But then again, I suppose with the Atari computers, especially, they were American, so maybe that's why they didn't want to look at them. But then from sort of going through that, it does go into the modern day, where the industry is now and where it's going to go. And I kind of lost interest towards the end, because it felt like that bit didn't need to be there. The film is very much a nostalgic look back, that it's not going to teach you anything new. I learned nothing from watching this movie, and I didn't hear anything I hadn't heard before at all. But what was brilliant, what I enjoyed was, like I've already emphasised, is the nostalgia. The film is just so nostalgic. I mean, I watched it and I was a Spectrum owner growing up and using the BBC at school, and I used my friends' computers, and my next door neighbour had a BBC Micro as well. I've got a lot of nostalgia for those years, and although I don't really touch the Spectrum nowadays, because I just find it quite disappointing when I do, I still have a lot of nostalgia for the machine. I think that's another reason why I don't tend to touch it these days, because I don't want to ruin a lot of that nostalgia that I have for the Specky. And it brought back so many memories of going into shops and buying my games, sending off for games. Remember being so excited when you saw a preview of the latest arcade game when it was coming to the Spectrum in the magazines, and all sorts of things like that. And I never thought that I would get to meet a lot of those people that I grew up kind of worshipping. I mean, to mention, again, Jim Bagley, who I've already mentioned, I consider a friend of mine now, and I see him at shows and chat to him on Facebook and stuff. But he made one of my very, very favourite Spectrum games, Cabal, which I bought full price and absolutely loved. I loved the arcade game, bought the Spectrum version. For me, it was probably the best arcade conversion on the Spectrum, and he also did Midnight Resistance, which was great as well. A few other brilliant games, but Cabal was just so good, and to be able to meet and chat with the guy who made Cabal these days it's just brilliant. And to consider him a friend, that's fantastic. And I think that's one of the great things about retro gaming. You can go to these shows and meet all these people, and what comes across very much in this film is that those people are very much gaming fans themselves. They might have been there at the time programming the games, but they loved it, and they still love it. And a lot of these people still even contribute. I mean, Jim Bagley himself, as you look on my channel, see the demo he's just done of Dragon's Lair for the ZX81, which is turning into a full game. And the fact he's still doing stuff like that I just find incredible. I just love it. It's absolutely amazing. And getting back to this film, it is the nostalgia that makes this a good movie, and that kind of warm feeling it gives you inside watching them talk about all the things that you remember from your childhood. And it is a very British film. I mean, I can't see it really appealing to American audiences. I suppose they might watch it and learn something new. They might learn a lot about the British games industry, but they're certainly not going to get the nostalgic feeling that us Brits would get from watching it, because they're not going to remember a lot of what we're talking about when they grew up with stuff like Apple and Nintendo. So, overall, there's some great stuff there. The nostalgia, it's very well made. They've got great people in the film to interview. Production value is very high, things like that. But it falls down on the end segment, which I feel was totally unneeded. I just don't feel they needed to go into modern day gaming at all. I think that would have been best off left out of the film completely. And I do think they've really shot themselves in the foot with the extortionate prices they're charging to buy it and download it. And another sort of note I want to finish on as well, and before I sort of wrap up, is that the guys who are actually behind Bedrooms to Billions, which is actually running on my laptop behind me, they are now doing another film, a follow-up, on the Amiga, called the Amiga Years or something like that. And this one, the Amiga film, I am quite critical of, and I feel that they've made quite a bit of blunder. I mean, the Amiga was a popular computer, but what they did with Bedrooms to Billions was focus on that whole 8-bit era. And it seems very strange to then go to 16-bit era and just concentrate on one machine. I mean, when the 16-bit era first came in, it was all about the Atari ST. It was a while before the Amiga came into the picture, really. The Atari ST was the machine that kicked off the 16-bit era. It was the most popular machine for several years. Then the Amiga came in, then the Acorn Archimedes came in, then the PCs started to become games machines. And then, also, of course, we've got 16-bit consoles and the Mega Drive and the SNES. And I cannot for the life of me understand why they didn't choose to just focus it on the 16-bit era and look at, from the early years, from where the ST trying to beating the Amiga to the market. All the controversy behind the Amiga was obviously originally going to be an Atari machine. It ended up being Commodore. The ST was originally going to be a Commodore machine. It ended up being an Atari machine. All of that stuff. The war between ST Amiga, I remember very well. I went to the ST. I had friends who went to the Amiga, mainly the Commodore 64 owners that I knew. And most of the people I knew who owned Spectrums and other machines went to the ST. And that was every bit of playground battle as Spectrum versus Commodore 64 was. Just as big, just as fierce, still going on today. The ST was a big part of the scene here. It sold in millions, best-selling computer for several years. Both machines, the ST and the Amiga, are celebrating their 30th birthday this year. Why just focus on the Amiga? And what made me even more angry was having seen the trailer for the Amiga film, and then one of the first comments was somebody slagging off the ST, which I just thought, why? It's straight away you kind of ruined your credibility somewhat by coming across as being a bit fanboyish. And then you see a few games, and made me laugh that a couple of games they showed were actually games that are well known for being superior on the ST to the Amiga, so that did make me chuckle a little bit. But I feel they've really missed the mark here. I mean, as I say, I went to the ST, but I love the Amiga as well. They're both great machines. The Amiga, for me, has become a bit more interesting machine in recent years once I discovered the history of it, because I'm a massive Atari Lynx fan, as everyone knows. Lynx was designed by the same people who designed the Amiga. And of course, before the Amiga, they designed the Atari 8-bit and the Atari 2600. And a lot of those people went through from the first days of gaming. So the Amiga, and that later the 3DO. So the Amiga is an interesting machine from the people behind it as well, especially, and some of the things it introduced. So I love the Amiga, I love the ST. And it would have been great to see a movie looking at those years, with maybe a little bit about where the PC started to come in and take over from them, and the consoles started to come in and take over, and that would have made a great movie. just focusing on the Amiga, I find baffling, especially as other people are doing an Amiga film. There's an Amiga, Viva Amiga, is it? Amiga Forever, something like that. There's a couple of Amiga books coming out. I mean, why, not diversify a little bit and do something different to what everyone else is doing? But anyway, rant over on the Amiga movie. Feel free to comment and tell me what you think of that. But that's my focus on that. Back to Bedrooms to Billions. I mean, say if you are a similar age to myself, I'm in my late 30s, and you grew up through those years with the Speccy, the Commodore 64, and you still have a lot of love for those machines. Then you're going to love Bedrooms to Billions, and you should go and watch it. If you didn't love the Spectrum, didn't love the Commodore 64, there's probably nothing here for you. If you're an American, you want to find, or anywhere else in the world for that matter, and you want to find out more about those years in the British games industry, you might find this interesting. But then again, I'm not sure. Maybe you'll find it boring. If you're an American and you've watched this, leave a comment and tell me what you think. Did you find it interesting? Because the thing is, there's not that much factual stuff there. It's just a lot of people's memories more than anything. So, it's whether you're looking for something very factual and more like World War One. That matter. So overall, my rating for this would be a 7 out of 10. Bedrooms to Billions. So go and have a look at the website and the offers that are available on downloading it and buying it, and I'll leave it up to you whether you think it's worth it considering the price. I'm going to do a couple more of these reviews of video game films because I've been watching a lot recently, so look out for them. But for now, I'm going to leave you. I hope you enjoyed this review. If there's anything you want to see from me, as always, leave a comment and let me know. And I'll see you all again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.